So then he goes on to say, what we have been seeing with drones is the operational use of gravity propulsion systems, which I'm going to have you explain what that is. It's at this point supposedly a theoretical technology, it's not something that is supposedly out there and actually been able to be used. It's theoretical only, but you've been saying all along, and also there's others like you that have been saying things like Dr. Sean Greer, who've been saying this stuff is not theoretical at all. They have it and they've been developing it and using it. But let me just get to the rest, and then we're going to start off with what that technology is. So he says, these drones, what we're seeing are drones, the use of operational gravity propulsion systems, powered aircraft by most recently China on the East Coast. But throughout history, the US has also used them. Only we in China have this capability. Our OPCEN which is Operations Center, says the location for this activity is in the box below. China has been launching them from the Atlantic from submarines for years, but this activity recently has picked up. As of now, it's just a show of force, and they're using it similarly to how they use the balloon for signal and ISR, which ISR stands for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So that's just like gathering data. He says, so he's talking about the balloon that was seen floating over the United States and then shot down. Says these are all part of these integrated comm systems. There are dozens of these balloons in the air at any given time, he says. And then he says the so what is because of the speed and stealth of these unmanned aircraft. They are the most dangerous threat to national security that has ever existed. They basically have an unlimited payload capacity. So that's meaning they could carry a large amount of equipment or weapons. And he says they could park it over the White House if they wanted. It's checkmate. Okay. So now he's saying China's got it. China's coming after us with these. Tell us what, first of all, I'm curious about what you think about those claims. But tell me what you think. First of all, give us the rundown of gravity propulsion technology, this theoretical technology.
First of all, that's not just a passing reference he put in that letter. That's like 5-6 paragraphs where he's talking through this, and for me, actually someone pointed out, like, do you think he was a fan of your work at this point? Because it's so bizarrely directly connected to what, like, yes, I've been saying, and people like Stephen Greer and many others. I'm relatively new on this whole scene of looking into this, but yeah, absolutely. That contrary to what academia and the mainstream media would say is that we can understand gravity, and these black projects or defense contractors that have been doing experiments that are not publicly known have figured out gravity for a long time. And maybe they figured it out from UFO aliens, whatever. Maybe they dug something up in the Sahara Desert related to the lost city of Atlantis. I don't know. But I do know that they've figured that out, and we've got that level of technology. And my research shows that it is related to like plasma, cold plasma, non-equilibrium plasmas, where you can actually just make a bubble in space-time and have energy trapped in that region, much like a ball of lightning, which is actually why they call it ball lightning. And then you can move it around like a drone. And the reason why this was so specific in his letter, where he says about the payload, is that the payload for a weapon like this is like a lightning strike from Zeus being struck down. And then it's just a question of, well, if you can zap multiple together, what does that do to whatever's inside of that? Are they just completely annihilated? Does it teleport them somewhere else? And that kind of payload can't be stopped. And if you scale it up, it's very easy to see how this becomes something that is extremely dangerous to society in general, because it's potentially infinitely more powerful than any atomic bomb that we currently use today, and then potentially unstoppable. And if two warring factions were to have that level of advanced technology, how long do we have on this planet before we annihilate ourselves? And then how do we, if this energy, this weaponry is also the secret to unlimited energy for all of society, can we use that in a good way before we get to a point where we, annihilate ourselves, I guess. That's the big question here.
Right. Right. So the way that this tech would, so it's kind of break it down a little bit, the science a little. I mean, I know it's
Sure.
probably difficult to do because it's like if
No,
everybody could do
good.
it, they would be.
No, so the simplest thing you understand is that 0 point energy is energy that's all around us, and it's experimentally proven to exist. The controversial part becomes whether or not we think this is like a small amount of energy or if it's a significant amount of energy. And quantum mechanics says it's a significant amount of energy. General relativity says no, there's this, it's insignificant, you can't tap into it at all. This
Hmm.
is where people like Richard Feynman, who was a Nobel Prize winner in 1965 for quantum electrodynamics, he is one of the people that calculated that this energy was enough where the energy in the empty space of a coffee cup was enough to vaporize all the Earth's oceans. So we can tell what side of the argument he's on. He's on the
Right.
side of the argument that it's this huge amount. And I think that's going to be proven to be true, is that we are in this vast amount of energy all the time. So if that's the case, then you have to think of it in terms of the same thing like wind and solar, but it's even better than that. It's just all around us all the time. Um, but that there are implications for manipulating at it because it means that we are basically in this equilibrium that we don't experience of energy all around us. And even if we pull out all the energy that we think is there, all the temperature, there is still this vast amount of energy down there that we can still tap into. And this energy then represents an unlimited amount of real green energy. It doesn't require the sun to be coming down on us. But like Einstein showed, is that mass and energy, while they are interchangeable, mass is energy. At the same time, if we pull the energy out of there or add energy to it, we're manipulating space time. So we're manipulating time itself. So this becomes very dangerous because now we're talking about this ability to manipulate this medium of energy that we're in is a way where we can pull a huge amount of energy out. We can create a big explosion, but we can also actually change the rate of time for either people that were like occupied in a bubble within it or just people that are near it in general. So it's a paradigm shift of technology that I think that a lot of people struggle with comprehending compared to where we are at publicly right now, just because of those massive, massive leaps in understanding of just reality in general.
Right.
So
Okay.
how I want to tie this real quick back to the incident with the letter is that this guy may I think that the theories that are pervading out there are one that somebody took him out because he had some information. The other theory that okay, maybe he was just making this all up, which I have a hard time believing because I think a lot of it's true. But maybe he was right, and maybe he was just somebody who was into like the UFO stuff and wrote this up, but it's really specific. And then the other theory that he was just wanting to make a statement, and he was trying to whistleblow this information. He's bringing it to people like Sean Ryan with this information that's out there. And I want to preface this: I'm not saying this is what caused it, but when people are exposed to that level of awakening, of that we have this technology, like wow, how has this been kept hidden? What does this mean for our place in the universe and our society in general? It has a huge impact on your psyche. It really does. And like some people can compartmentalize it and go on with their day and doesn't impact them at all. And other people, like they have an adverse reaction to it. So this is part of the reason why it's like you have to kind of wake people up with this idea that like we are not at the pinnacle of society right now. We have not the highest. This is not the most technologically advanced we're ever going to get. It's going to get way, way crazier than where we're at right now.
Okay. So, I mean, according to his email, he didn't really seem to be thinking like the way that you're looking at this tech and the way that like Dr. Sean Greer looks at this tech, for instance, which is this tech is incredible in what it can do for mankind. Yes, it has potential for destruction, right? Because when you're talking about that much energy and like inside of a coffee cup that it could annihilate, that is a very, very powerful weapon. But it's also a very powerful energy source that would wipe out major multi-billion-dollar industries, right? I mean, we wouldn't need all of these mega industries that, I mean, just think about the power and money in the oil industry. And now we're seeing those sectors shift to like solar, wind, right? All of these different techs. And it's like, yeah, but if we could make energy out of nothing, then suddenly all of the big power players become extremely antiquated. It's like the invention of commercial air flight versus trains. People just don't ride on trains anymore. And so the one of the theories that's been out there is the reason why this type of technology has existed and not been shared is for those two specific reasons, right? The fact that it could be used, this type of tech could be used to annihilate. It's like nuclear power. Nuclear is amazing, right? Nuclear gives a lot of people a lot of energy, but nuclear also is nuclear, and that could be very scary technology. So it's that same sort of thing. Like, oh my gosh, what if other nations suddenly got a hold of this type of energy source, they could also make extremely powerful weapons with this energy source. So that is, and then the other reason why they don't want to share it is because it would wipe out industries, and there's just too much lobby money in these power players. They just don't want these industries to come forward. So that's been the
Well,
the
well,
thinking. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, well, let me just add on to it too, is that you're saying all the right stuff now, and I love that you're coming to this conclusion. I'm not even saying anything. You've already come to these conclusions. You realize how big that is. All those things you just said, like, it almost seems insurmountable. But at the same time, that's what this technology represents. That's the big secret. That's the national security issue. Aliens aren't a national security issue. It's like, oh, there's life out there. Okay, great. How's that a national security issue to our to our planet? It's not. If it was, they wouldn't be able to talk about it. So that's the stuff they're allowed to talk about. And then they say, oh, well, there's if you ask about the energy source for these UFOs, now it's a national security issue, just because of just what you said. Is it the
Right.
same thing that it can produce these weapons like what we're seeing in this MH370 video here? That's an energy source as well. And in this video where it flashes, you can see the light reflect off the cloud. This is something that, like, when we talked before, I didn't fully understand the physics of this, but when you're actually tapping into this 0 point energy, there's an effect called the dynamic Casimir effect. And a large electromagnetic flux basically pulls light out of the ether, photons. And you can find this experiment out there that I just mentioned, dynamic Casimir effect, proven to pull light out of nothing. And that's what's happening with this flash that we see dynamically lighting the clouds. This is not just a glow effect. It's
Hmm.
actually accurately illuminating the cloud in 3 dimensions right there, which goes to show that if this video were fake, they would have to be using a 3 dimensional environment to produce it, which makes it much, much more complicated than just some kind of bored kid or what have you that's out there. Um, and I think this video proves that we have crazy advanced technology beyond what the public thinks. And gravitic drones and anti-gravity is just a property of interacting with this 0 point energy. If you remove the energy out there, plasma naturally, if you zap some lasers, you can produce this cold plasma, and it looks like it's just floating freely there. And the moment
Hmm.
we figured out how to break it free and let it move around however we want, then you get what you're seeing in this video, where we can start to do basically magic with it.
Yeah.
And this is like, what the government says, where, like, people say, oh, the government's military's 30 years ahead. The people like Stephen Greer, and I'm not affiliated with Stephen Greer. I don't even agree with all of his stuff, but I do think he's right about the technology stuff. And I wish him the best. I think that everybody should attack this disclosure thing however they want. I'm choosing to attack it by the technology. I think that this technology is like 100 to 1,000 years more advanced than we would be if we weren't knocking on the door right now demanding answers based on, like, what we see in videos like this, where we have a real plane missing 10 years later still, and we've got military footage here.
Hmm.
One more real quick, and then I'll let you ask anything you want. Is that we also recently trying to figure out, like, what is this video that we're looking at here? It's
Hmm.
got this weird blue tinge. It's nighttime, so whatever this is some kind of computer rendered tracking system. It turns out something called WAMI, wide area motion imagery. And it's actually beyond what I even thought. I had deduced, okay, it's satellites beaming data together to ground-based computers, and then they're logging in. That is what they're doing. But it actually can pull information from multiple assets at the same time too. So they can have, like, high altitude airplanes, spy planes, things like that. Drones have these packages on them, and they can combine this with the satellite, the low Earth orbit satellites as well. And then they just have, like, yeah, a virtual Google, playback. That's why when you're watching the camera, you're really just watching somebody on a computer screen. And it looks as well like what happens here is that this is a window. What happens is they have a wide view and you like click somewhere and this window pops up. And it looks like they recorded the window and then they move the screen, the visual around on the window when they're shifting around until it gets to this part and the plane disappears. And then they move the window again. And then all of a sudden it goes up and it looks like they minimize or close the window because it keeps recording, but it's black. And then the original footage. This might just prove that it's actually from one of these military software spy systems that they've got out there.
Hmm.
It's a huge reveal. And so for me, it's just like I'm just waiting for people to catch on to like, this is definitely military footage, not just some kid put that together and figured out how to make it look like that.
Where did you get this video?
So, and this is just a compilation right here of one of the, you can kind of switch through the other videos that I was sending you guys, but this one where a lot of people ask about, okay, well, where's the source of this? Like I wasn't given this information directly. And I would argue this is almost better, is that it was information that was just found on the internet. Videos that were found on the internet were proven to go back to just weeks after the plane disappeared. In fact, that previous video I just showed you, that one was on the internet just 70 days at most after the plane disappeared. And in it, it said description received March 12th, 2014, 4 days after the plane disappeared. And it was some small random YouTube account. So people were thinking, okay, maybe they did this because it was some kind of hoax to, I don't know, draw attention, but they never really drew attention to it. No, and they never really were like, hey, here's the missing plane that everybody's talking about. And the more and more you look at the videos and realize there's two videos from two different perspectives, one's in thermal. In this one here, you can see that the orb actually interacts with the smoke coming out of the back of the plane. You can see the accurate fluid dynamics on it. And some of these small details, there's no way anybody that's not a true professional is going to add in some small detail like this as well.
Hmm.
So I think that the more we start to realize that we do have like anti-gravitic drones, like what the Cybertruck guy, Matt Livelsberger, like he was talking about, the sooner we realize we have that level of technology, I think the sooner that we will be able to kind of free ourselves from the shackles of energy dependence. Because you're right, I think this technology represents two different things. And so here's anyway the other video. One other thing I want to point out about the propulsion, you see these lines, they're kind of faint, but they're kind of they're in front of these orbs. At first, it looks like they're behind the orbs. But these orbs as well, you can see a heat signature in them. This is the gravitic propulsion. This is, if I was just to imagine, what would gravitic propulsion look like? That's exactly what I would imagine if you're looking at from 0-point energy perspective. You're pulling the energy out in front of you, and this changes the force of gravity as pressure force that we
Hmm.
feel. And if you change that pressure force, you're going to pull yourself forward, just like if you were on a conveyor belt. You're not moving, this conveyor belt moving. That's how you
Hmm.
should imagine gravitic propulsion. Or like on a surfboard. Like that's why they call it surfing. That's what they call it. That's why the gravity, they consider it, they use the analogy of surfing, because that's what you're doing. You're basically putting, with Miguel Alcubierre's warp drive, you're putting negative energy in front of you, positive energy behind you, and you're riding the surf wave. You're riding the wave. So that's what these things are doing. And the idea is, well, why have somebody inside of it at all? You can just use, if the plasma is the secret that makes the anti-gravity and makes the bubble in space-time, do you really want to be inside of that? No, we just turn it into a drone. Have it be an autonomous vehicle. And then you don't have to worry about it. That's what it's hard to believe that they've actually been that advanced since like 2014. But the more I think about it, the more I think, well, they could be even more advanced than that. Like in this particular, this means, if this is real right here, this means that somebody figured out that not only can make these balls of plasma, but they have such a high charge energy density that if you jam them together, it rips through what we would consider the ceiling in space-time. Like, oh, sorry, too much energy, boom, breaking right through. But we have terminology for that in general relativity. We call it a wormhole. Called a wormhole. You basically rip through the geometry, the curvature of space-time itself by putting too much electromagnetic energy in a small space. And if you make a bubble of that, then that's what we would consider, sending something through a wormhole. It's hard to believe that I'm the guy out of everybody in the world that is revealing that, okay, this might be real and we've got wormholes here, but that's what I think is happening. And I think that if I turn out to be right about all this physics, about these plasma drones and what have you, then people need to look at this video and really ask the United States government, like, what did we do to that airplane?